Forget what you have heard about Chris Christie. Forget what you have heard about the Herman Cain surge. Nationally tied for first as of today with Mitt Romney in the new CBS poll. Forget what you've heard about the second coming of Rick Perry. Forget what you've heard about Mitt Romney's inevitability. Forget what you've heard of the miracle of Rick Santorum and or Michelle Bachmann and or John Huntsman and or Buddy Roemer's candidacies. No matter what you have heard, it is already clear and settled who Barack Obama will be running against. Barack Obama will be running against Karl Rove. The groups Karl Rove started, American Crossroads and Crossroads GPS, recently doubled what they say they will raise and spend against Barack Obama this election season. Last time around in the 2010 midterms, they raised and spent $70 million. This time their goal was going to be $120 million to spend against Obama, but now they've decided it's going to be $240 million. So the Karl Rove group is going to be spending nearly $250 million to defeat Barack Obama this next election. Because Karl Rove himself is not technically the candidate, although really, what does it matter? And because of the Supreme Court's ruling in Citizens United, Karl Rove's groups can raise their money in unlimited fashion, unlimited donations, including unlimited donations directly from businesses. And we are getting our taste now of what that campaign is going to look like.
He raised our hopes. He seemed to understand.
The last thing you want to do is to raise taxes in the middle of a recession.
But today, he's different.
The president proposes tax increases.
$1.5 trillion.
Hold on, wait a minute. Now, this is how the Karl Rove group is running against President Obama. He's raising taxes. And you've got all these pictures of middle-class families upset that President Obama is raising their taxes. In this new ad, they pulled this stand-up from a CNN correspondent who's named Brianna Keeler, and she is saying how the president is raising taxes. Watch.
The president proposes tax increases.
That's what they pull from Brianna Keeler. You want to hear that statement from Brianna Keeler in context? Want to see what the Karl Rove people had to take apart from her in order to get her saying that damning sounding thing that they could show alongside all those sad looking middle class people, so sad about how President Obama is going to raise their middle class taxes? Here's what she actually said in context.
The headline today is really how the president proposes to pay for his jobs plan, and the answer to that is tax increases. The bulk of paying for the $450 billion plan would come from limiting itemized deductions that wealthier Americans take. We're talking about individuals who make $200,000 or more, or families that make $250,000 or more. There are also tax increases that you would see affecting hedge fund managers, oil and gas companies, as well as corporate jet owners.
So that damning he wants to raise middle-class taxes ad from Karl Rove's group is cut and pasted like it's refrigerator poetry out of a CNN correspondent actually explaining that the president wants to pay for his jobs plan by taxing corporate jets and oil and gas companies and hedge fund managers and families that make $250,000 a year or more. The Karl Rove's folks just say, tax, and then they show you pictures of middle-class families. So you're supposed to believe that what Obama is proposing is raising taxes on middle-class families. This is genius, right? I mean, it's bullpucky, but it is genius bullpucky. This is the best bullpucky money can buy. This is gold-plated campaign bullpucky. If I were that CNN reporter, I might sue over them using me like that. But you can expect $250 million of this gold-plated bullpucky to be spent against President Obama over the next 13 months. It is 13 months of this that's ahead of us. 13 months during which not only does the country have to wade through another presidential election, but we also have to govern ourselves, which this year means trying to keep ourselves out of a second devastating recession. The chairman of the Federal Reserve today telling a joint congressional hearing that the recovery from the last recession is in danger of faltering. In other words, we are in danger of slipping back into another recession right now. Regardless of what happens in the next election, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to do anything to try to avoid that? Are we going to change course in order to avoid barreling into a second recession? You tell me. Here are the two sides that get to decide. On the right, there's Karl Rove and a handful of billionaires. 92% of what American Crossroads raised this year so far came from 3 people. 3 billionaires. Karl Rove does not need very many people in order to raise $250 million against Barack Obama. I mean, the Koch brothers are worth $25 billion each. They could spend $5 billion each, $10 billion each, $20 billion each, whatever. Post Citizens United, you can make unlimited donations now. So you just need a handful of people. There's a handful of right-wing billionaires on one side who can spend an infinite amount of money. And on their side, even as the chairman of the Fed pleads with Congress today for action to save the economy, for them to not cut, for them to do something for economic growth, even as that happens, even as we scuttle into this new crisis, Republicans in Congress are now saying they will take no action on the jobs bill. So that's on the one side. Here's the other side.
We've got to put America back to work. 3 weeks ago, I sent Congress a bill called the American Jobs Act. Some of you might have heard of it. Everything in it is the kind of proposal that's been supported by Democrats and Republicans in the past. Everything in it. Everything in it will be paid for. So it won't add to our deficit. What we say is, in addition to spending cuts, if we want to actually close this deficit, instead of just playing politics, then we've got to ask the wealthiest Americans, the biggest corporations, to pay their fair share. Warren Buffett's secretary shouldn't be paying a higher tax rate than Warren Buffett. In the United States of America, a nurse or a teacher or a construction worker making $50,000 shouldn't pay higher tax rates than somebody pulling in $50 million. That's not fair. It's not right. It's got to change. We've got a chance to change it. Maybe some people in Congress would rather wait until the election to settle our differences, and I promise you I will be ready for that election. I will be ready for that debate. I am happy to have a debate before the American people because I believe that the American people understand that we're in this together.
So it's a handful of billionaires that the Karl Rove Group says they're going to tap to raise $250 million to run against President Obama this election cycle, and congressional Republicans on the one side. It is President Obama and congressional Democrats on the other side, along with the people in the country who say they agree with them. 73% of the country saying they agree with the Obama proposal, for example, to not have millionaires be taxed at a lower rate than non-millionaires anymore. Even 66% of Republicans saying they agree with that. So opposite Karl Rove and his billionaires and congressional Republicans, it's President Obama, it's congressional Democrats, it's the country that says they agree with them, and it's unions. The AFL-CIO is launching their own jobs campaign now. They are calling it America Wants to Work. As part of it, do you want to know how many bridges are structurally deficient where you live and conveniently right in the same place? How many people are out of work? There's an app for that now at their America Wants to Work website. If you want to bug your member of Congress about what needs doing in your state and how we could put people to work doing it, the AFL-CIO is giving people the facts to make that case. Just in case you are not a billionaire, but you think you might still have something to add to our national debate over what we're going to do between now and the next election. Joining us now is Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO. Mr. Trumka, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Rachel, thanks for having me on.
So your new jobs plan includes the kind of goals that labor has been long calling for. Big infrastructure investment, energy and education investment, manufacturing investment, aid to state and local governments, home mortgage aid, Wall Street reform, things that you have called for in the past. But this is put together in one package. Is it meant to be different than what the president is proposing, bigger than what the president is proposing? How does this fit in with what we are hearing from President Obama?
Well, I think the president made a very, very important step when he introduced the American Jobs Bill. He switched the debate from deficit hysteria that really doesn't put anybody back to work to job creation. And his bill is a very, very important first step. And he'll tell you that it's only a first step. We want to support that bill. We want to put millions of Americans back to work because if you want to cure the economy, if you want to eliminate deficits, Rachel, the best way to do that is put Americans back to work. And that's what that proposal will do.
When we talk specifically about investing in infrastructure, about dealing with stuff like decrepit bridges, those have long been nonpartisan issues, not even bipartisan, but they're the kinds of issues that partisanship didn't even get raised in those discussions. Do you feel like we're actually less likely to make those needed investments in a year like this than we would in previous years because they're now tarred as a partisan thing?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. In the past, the Surface Transportation Act, the Clean Water Act, all of those things were done in a bipartisan manner because they're necessary for the country's future. See, we've gone from having the number 4 infrastructure in the world to number 17, and we're dropping because we're not investing in that infrastructure. It makes us less competitive, and creating those or fixing that infrastructure will put millions of Americans back to work. I think anybody who votes against putting people back to work between now and Election Day does so at their own peril, because the American people, union and non-union people alike, are tired of the obstructionism. They're tired of creating a crisis that denies them a vote. They sent people to Congress to create jobs. They're not doing that, and they're going to take it out on the people that are obstructionists.
The Beltway common wisdom right now is that this is not going to get done. That's what all the Beltway press says. I know that you can count votes as well as anybody in Washington and predict where things are going. Do you think that this is not going to get passed? Do you agree with the common wisdom?
No, I think we're going to get a lot of this passed, if not all of it passed, because the American public are demanding it. Look, we're putting on a campaign. It's called America Wants to Work. From October 10th through the 16th, we're going to have a week of actions around the country in congressional districts, in front of senators, bringing together people of all different stripes. They're going to be small business people. They're going to be non-union people. They're going to be union people. There'll be construction people. A little bit of everything, saying, look, enough of this nonsense. Help us get people back to work. Help us with infrastructure. Help us resurrect manufacturing. Give us some aid to state and local governments so they don't continue to lay off people. Help us put people back to work, or you do so at your own peril. And I think it's going to have a tremendous effect. You see what's happening on Wall Street right now. And thousands and millions probably of people agree with what the message is, that this economy is working for 1% of the people, and the rest of us, the other 99%, are getting left behind in this economy. So those that support the 1%, I think are going to have a tough time next year explaining to the American public why they didn't step up to the plate and create jobs.
Here in New York, I know there's a major Occupy Wall Street march planned for tomorrow. There's Occupy Wall Street actions and a sort of affiliate actions happening all over the country now. Boston, L.A., Chicago, Seattle, lots of smaller cities and towns across the country are doing this. But in New York, people are excited about this planned march for tomorrow, in part because I know some AFL-CIO member unions are planning on participating and planning on supporting what those protesters are doing. Do you know what we should expect in terms of union support for the Occupy Wall Street movement, whether you think it's going to become a bigger deal?
Oh, absolutely. Because what they're doing is saying what all of us believe and what we know. Look, Wall Street created this mess. They destroyed $13 trillion in value. And we have a couple of simple demands from them. One, we want them to invest in America, big business in Wall Street, to invest in America and create jobs. They have $2 trillion parked in accounts across the country. They won't spend it to invest in America. Meanwhile, small businesses can't get loans because the big banks have $1 trillion parked in the Federal Reserve banks around the country. We want them to stop foreclosures by writing down mortgages, stop the 14 million foreclosures that are out there, the mortgages that are underwater, put people back to work by that would create $70 billion worth of demand.
Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, thank you for joining us tonight, sir. It's always a real pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for having me on again.